For 10 years, my son said he had cancer. I sent $600 monthly for treatment, but his doctor called. When Dr. Harrison's voice came through my phone that cold February morning, I expected updates about my son's chemotherapy schedule. Instead, I heard words that made me grip my kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Mrs. Patterson, I'm afraid there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Your son, Marcus, has never been a patient at Memorial Cancer Center. In fact, we have no record of him ever receiving treatment here. 10 years, 120 months, $72,000, all built on a lie told by the child I would have died for. Good day, dear listeners. It's Isabella again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Today's story comes from a woman who learned that the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people we trust most, the people we raised, the people we sacrificed everything for. My name is Dorothy Patterson, and I'm 73 years old. I live in a modest 2-bedroom house in Spokane, Washington, the same house where I raised my 2 children and buried my husband's ashes in the garden beneath his favorite rose bushes. Harold passed away 15 years ago from a sudden heart attack. He was only 62. We'd been married for 38 years, and losing him felt like losing half of myself. Harold was a mechanic who owned his own shop downtown. He wasn't a fancy man, but he was honest. He worked with his hands and came home every night smelling like motor oil and integrity. We never had much money, but we had enough. Enough to raise our children right. Enough to put food on the table. Enough to save a little each month for our retirement. After Harold died, I continued working as a medical records clerk at Sacred Heart Hospital for another 8 years before retiring at 66. My pension isn't large, about $2,200 a month, but combined with Social Security, I've always managed. I have 2 children. My daughter, Rebecca, who's 47, lives in Portland with her husband, Thomas, and their 3 children. She calls me every Sunday without fail and visits at least 4 times a year. Then there's Marcus. He's 51 now. And until that phone call in February, I believed he was the bravest person I knew. A cancer survivor who'd been fighting the disease for a decade. There's a photograph on my living room mantel that I used to look at every single day. It shows Marcus at 12 years old, sitting on Harold's shoulders at a 4th of July parade. Both of them are grinning so wide you can count their teeth. Harold used to say Marcus had his smile and my stubborn streak. I never imagined that stubborn streak would one day be used against me in the cruelest possible way. The lie began in January 2014. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before. He was 41 years old then, working as an assistant manager at an electronics store in Phoenix, Arizona. He'd moved there in his 20s, chasing a girl who eventually became his wife, Vanessa. They'd married in 2005 and had 2 children, my grandchildren Tyler and Madison, who were 8 and 6 at the time of that terrible phone call. "Mom," Marcus said, and I could hear him struggling to get the words out. "I have to tell you something. I've been to the doctor. They found something. A tumor. In my lymph nodes. They're calling it Hodgkin's lymphoma." I remember dropping into Harold's old recliner, the brown leather one that still sits in the corner of my living room. My hand went to my chest. My son, my baby boy, cancer. The word felt like a physical blow. "How bad is it?" I managed to ask. "Stage 2, he said. "The doctor says it's treatable, but it's going to be a long road. Chemotherapy, maybe radiation. And Mom, our insurance." He paused, and I heard what sounded like a sob. "Our insurance doesn't cover everything. There are co-pays, medications, treatments that aren't covered. Vanessa's already working 2 jobs, and I'm going to have to cut back my hours because of the treatments." What mother wouldn't help? What mother could hear her child say the word cancer and not immediately offer everything she had? How much do you need? I asked without hesitation. I hate asking this, Mom. I really do. But if you could help with maybe $500 a month, just until I get through the worst of it. I told him I'd send $600. It wasn't much more, but I wanted him to have a little extra. For the kids, for gas money to get to appointments, for whatever small comfort that extra $100 might buy during what I imagined would be the fight of his life. The first check went out that Friday, January 17th, 2014. I still remember writing it at my kitchen table, tears streaming down my face, praying to Harold's memory that our son would survive this. That was 10 years ago. For 10 years, I sent $600 every single month without fail. Even when my car needed repairs, I took the bus. When my own doctor recommended dental work I desperately needed, I postponed it. When my refrigerator died in the summer of 2019, I lived out of a cooler for 3 weeks until I could afford a replacement because that month's check had already gone to Marcus. Every month, Marcus would call with updates. The treatments were working, then they weren't. The cancer was in remission, then it came back. New experimental medications were showing promise, but they cost more, always more. The $600 became $700 in 2016 after he told me about a new targeted therapy that his insurance refused to cover. By 2020, I was sending $800 a month, sometimes more when he had an emergency. I kept a journal. Dorothy's stupid, sentimental journal. Harold would have called it with a smile. Every month I wrote down how much I sent and what Marcus said it was for. March 2017, $800 for PT scan copay. August 2018, $1,200 for medication not covered by insurance. December 2019, $2,500 for emergency hospitalization after bad reaction to chemo. The list went on and on and on. In total, over those 10 years, I sent my son $127,400. I had to take out a small mortgage on my house in 2021 to keep helping him. $25,000 against the home Harold and I had paid off together. For my son, for his treatment, for his life. And none of it was real. The phone call from Dr. Raymond Harrison came on Tuesday, February 6th, 2024, at exactly 9:47 in the morning. I was making oatmeal, the same breakfast I'd eaten every day since Harold died, because it was cheap and filling and left more money for Marcus. The caller ID showed a Phoenix area code, and I assumed it was Marcus's oncology office calling to confirm something. Mrs. Patterson? Mrs. Dorothy Patterson? The voice was professional, careful. Yes, this is she. My name is Dr. Raymond Harrison. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Memorial Cancer Center in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm calling about your son, Marcus Patterson. My heart stuttered. Chief Medical Officer. That sounded important. That sounded like the kind of person who calls when something has gone very wrong. I gripped the counter and prepared myself for the worst news a mother can receive. Is he okay? Has something happened? There was a long pause. Too long. Mrs. Patterson, I'm not quite sure how to say this, so I'm just going to be direct with you. I'm calling because our billing department received a letter from you last week inquiring about payment records for your son's treatment. I had sent that letter. After Marcus mentioned in January that he might need surgery, I'd written to the hospital asking for a comprehensive statement of all payments I'd made over the years. I wanted to organize my records for tax purposes. Yes, I said. I wanted documentation for my files. Mrs. Patterson, that's why I'm calling personally. We have no record of a Marcus Patterson ever receiving treatment at this facility. I've checked our records going back 15 years. Your son has never been a patient at Memorial Cancer Center. He's never been treated for Hodgkin's lymphoma or any other form of cancer at our hospital. The kitchen seemed to tilt. I watched my oatmeal bubble over onto the stove and did nothing to stop it. That's impossible. My son has been receiving chemotherapy at your hospital for 10 years. He's told me about his doctors, his nurses. He's mentioned you by name, Dr. Harrison. I understand how confusing this must be, but I've personally reviewed our database. We have no record of your son, no appointments, no treatments, no billing, nothing. I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, but whatever your son has told you, it isn't true. I don't remember hanging up the phone. I don't remember turning off the stove or cleaning up the burned oatmeal. The next thing I clearly remember is sitting in Harold's recliner 4 hours later, my journal open on my lap, staring at 10 years of entries, 10 years of lies, $127,400. Gone, stolen, not by a stranger, by my own son. Something cold settled in my chest that day. Not sadness, not yet. Sadness would come later, in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep. What I felt in that moment was something sharper, clearer. It was the feeling of a woman who had just discovered that everything she believed was a lie. And with that coldness came a strange, terrible clarity. I needed to know everything. The next morning, I called my daughter, Rebecca. I needed someone I could trust, and Rebecca had always been the steady one. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and concerned when she heard how shaky I sounded. "Mom, what's wrong? You sound terrible." I told her everything. The phone call from Dr. Harrison, the 10 years of payments, the mortgage I'd taken out on the house. When I finished, there was silence on the line for so long I thought the call had dropped. "That son of a bitch," Rebecca finally said, her voice hard in a way I'd never heard before. "Mom, how much did you send him total?" $127,000, plus the interest on the mortgage. "I'm coming to Spokane. I'm booking a flight right now. Don't call Marcus. Don't do anything until I get there. We're going to figure this out together." Rebecca arrived on Thursday, February 8th. She walked into my house, took one look at me, and pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. Then she got to work. She called every major hospital in the Phoenix metropolitan area: Banner University Medical Center, Mayo Clinic, Arizona, Honor Health, Arizona Oncology. Nobody had any record of Marcus Patterson as a patient. She called his employer, the electronics store where he supposedly worked reduced hours due to his illness. They told her Marcus had been working full-time for the past decade and had just been promoted to regional manager last year. "Regional manager," Rebecca repeated, her voice flat with disgust. "He got a promotion. While you were skipping meals to send him money for fake cancer treatment, he got a promotion." But the worst discovery came when Rebecca checked Marcus's social media accounts. He'd blocked me years ago, claiming that seeing happy posts while he was sick was too painful. But he hadn't blocked Rebecca, and what she found made me sick to my stomach. Vacations, dozens of them. Marcus and Vanessa on a beach in Hawaii, dated March 2022, a ski trip to Aspen, December 2023, a cruise to the Caribbean, summer 2021, a weekend in Las Vegas where they'd stayed at the Bellagio just 3 months after I'd sent an extra $1,000 for what Marcus called an emergency radiation session. "Look at this one," Rebecca said, her voice trembling with rage. She showed me a photo dated August 2019. Marcus and Vanessa standing in front of a brand new BMW, big grins on their faces. The caption read, "Finally upgraded. Life is good." That was the same month I'd eaten nothing but rice and beans for 3 weeks, so I could send Marcus $1,500 for a medication that his insurance supposedly wouldn't cover. There were photos of home renovations, a new pool in their backyard, designer clothes, expensive restaurants, my grandchildren, Tyler and Madison, with brand new iPhones and gaming systems, all funded by my sacrifice, my love, my trust. I spread all the receipts across my dining table that weekend, bank statements showing every transfer, the journal with every entry, screenshots Rebecca had printed of Marcus's social media posts. The timeline of his lies laid out in black and white and color photographs. The number stared back at me, unchanging and cruel. $127,400. We need a lawyer, Rebecca said. A good one. On Monday, February 12th, I sat in the office of attorney Barbara Hendricks. She came highly recommended by a friend from my old job at the hospital, a woman who'd used Barbara for her own family legal troubles. Barbara was in her early 60s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. Her office was in downtown Spokane, on the 4th floor of a building that overlooked the river. She wore a navy blue suit and a single strand of pearls, and when she shook my hand, her grip was firm and confident. "Mrs. Patterson," she said after I finished telling my story, "what your son did to you is called theft by deception. It's also elder financial abuse under both Washington and Arizona state law. These are serious crimes." "Will he go to prison?" I asked. "That depends on several factors. The amount involved, his cooperation, whether we pursue criminal charges or focus on civil recovery. But I want to be very clear with you, Mrs. Patterson. You have an extremely strong case. The documentation you've kept is excellent. The evidence is overwhelming. And juries tend to be very sympathetic to elderly victims of family fraud, especially when the fraud was this egregious and this prolonged." She explained my options. We could file a civil lawsuit seeking full restitution plus damages. We could also report the matter to the Phoenix Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Barbara recommended doing both. "The criminal case puts pressure on him," she explained. "The civil case gets you your money back. They work together." I signed the retainer agreement that afternoon. Barbara's fee was $10,000 up front, but Rebecca insisted on paying it. "Consider it a loan," she said. "You'll get it back when we're done with Marcus." The next 2 weeks were a flurry of activity. Barbara filed the civil lawsuit in Maricopa County Superior Court on February 26, 2024. The complaint was 18 pages long and included counts for fraud, theft, elder abuse, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conversion of property. She sought damages of $250,000, more than double what I'd actually sent, to account for the emotional harm, the interest I'd paid on the mortgage, and punitive damages. She also coordinated with Detective Maria Rodriguez of the Phoenix Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Rodriguez was a small woman with dark hair and a no-nonsense attitude. She called me on March 5th to introduce herself and explain the criminal investigation process. "Mrs. Patterson, I've reviewed the evidence your attorney sent over," she said. "I have to tell you, in 22 years of investigating financial crimes, I've rarely seen a case this clear-cut. Your son created an elaborate fiction and used it to systematically defraud you for a decade. We're going to do everything we can to hold him accountable." Marcus found out about the lawsuit on March 4th, when a process server showed up at his house in Phoenix with the complaint. His response came that same evening, in the form of a phone call to my house at 9:23 p.m. I was sitting in the living room, watching television with Rebecca, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's number. Rebecca grabbed my arm. "Don't answer it." "I have to," I said. "I need to hear what he has to say." I pressed the green button and raised the phone to my ear. "Hello, Marcus. What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was loud, aggressive, nothing like the weak, grateful tone he'd used for the past 10 years when thanking me for my monthly payments. "I just got served with a lawsuit from my own mother. Have you completely lost your mind?" "Have I lost my mind?" I kept my voice steady, though my hands were trembling. "Marcus, you told me you had cancer for 10 years. You took $127,000 from me. You let me skip meals and postpone medical care and take out a mortgage on my home. And none of it was real. You were never sick." There was a pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, softer now, manipulative. "Mom, listen to me. There's been a misunderstanding. The treatments, they were at a different facility. A private clinic. That's why the hospital didn't have records. I can explain everything if you just give me a chance. What's the name of the clinic, Marcus? Another pause. Longer this time. I don't remember exactly. My head's been all over the place since I got this lawsuit, but I have the paperwork somewhere. I can find it and prove this is all a mistake. There is no clinic, I said. There was never any cancer. I've seen the pictures, Marcus. The vacations, the new car, the pool. While I was eating rice and beans to send you money for chemo, you were in Hawaii drinking cocktails on the beach. His tone shifted again. Harder. Those photos. Those were gifts from Vanessa's parents. They're rich, Mom. They help us out. That has nothing to do with the money you sent. Then you won't mind proving that in court. You're going to regret this. His voice was ice now. All pretense of filial affection gone. You think you can come after me? I'll have you declared mentally incompetent. I'll tell the judge you're a confused old woman who doesn't know what she's saying. I'll make sure everyone knows you've lost your mind. I felt something shift inside me, the last thread of hope that maybe, somehow, there was an explanation I hadn't considered. That thread snapped clean. Go ahead and try, I said. But Marcus, you should know something. I kept records. Every single month for 10 years. I wrote down what I sent and why. I have bank statements. I have your text messages. I have screenshots of your social media posts. And I have a very good lawyer who has already been in touch with the Phoenix police. This isn't going to end the way you think it is. He hung up without another word. The weeks that followed were difficult. Marcus did exactly what he threatened. He called Rebecca repeatedly, trying to convince her I was mentally unstable. He called my neighbors, my former co-workers, even my doctor's office, leaving messages suggesting I was showing signs of dementia and shouldn't be trusted. He sent me a letter, typed on official-looking stationery, claiming to be from a concerned family member, requesting that I be evaluated for cognitive decline. But he underestimated me. He underestimated the community I'd built over 50 years in Spokane. When my neighbor Patricia Goodwin got a call from Marcus suggesting I was losing my mind, she marched over to my house and demanded to know what was going on. When I told her the truth, she was furious, but not at me. That boy called me to say you were crazy? She was 81 years old and barely 5 feet tall, but her outrage could have filled a stadium. Dorothy, you're the sharpest person I know. You've been doing the New York Times crossword in pen since before his worthless behind was born. I'm going to testify for you if you need me to. She wasn't the only one. Word spread through my neighborhood, through my church, through my former workplace. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out to offer support. Cards arrived in my mailbox. Casseroles appeared on my porch. A group of women from my book club showed up one Saturday and insisted on taking me to lunch. You're not alone, they told me. We've got your back. I wasn't alone anymore. The criminal case moved quickly. On March 28th, Marcus was formally arrested at his home in Phoenix and charged with theft, fraud, and elder abuse. His bail was set at $50,000. He posted it within hours, using money that I now understood had probably come from me. The civil case was scheduled for trial on June 17, 2024, in the Maricopa County Superior Court. Barbara flew to Phoenix the week before to prepare. I drove down with Rebecca, who had taken 2 weeks off work to support me. The Maricopa County Courthouse was a massive building in downtown Phoenix, all glass and concrete, intimidating in its size and bureaucratic efficiency. On the morning of June 17th, I walked through the metal detectors with Rebecca on one side and Barbara on the other. I was wearing a navy blue dress I'd bought for Harold's funeral and hadn't worn since. It felt appropriate somehow. I was burying something today, too. Courtroom 4B was smaller than I'd expected. The judge's bench dominated one end of the room, raised up on a platform that made whoever sat there look like they were presiding from a great height. The American flag stood in one corner, and the Arizona state flag in the other. Wooden benches filled the gallery, and a few spectators had already taken seats. I recognized Patricia Goodwin, who had flown down to Phoenix just to be there for me. She gave me a thumbs up as I walked to the plaintiff's table. Marcus arrived a few minutes later with his own attorney, a younger man in an expensive suit who looked nervous. Marcus avoided my eyes as he took his seat at the defendant's table. He looked different than I remembered, thinner in the face, older. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of something like pity. Then I remembered the photo of him in Hawaii while I skipped meals, and the pity died. Judge Patricia Morrison entered at exactly 9 a.m. She was a woman in her late 50s with gray-streaked hair and a face that suggested she had seen every kind of human failing and was no longer surprised by any of it. "Good morning," she said, settling into her chair. "We're here in the matter of Patterson versus Patterson, case number CV 2024-003847. Is the plaintiff ready to proceed?" Barbara stood. "Yes, Your Honor. Dorothy Patterson is present and ready." "And the defendant?" Marcus's attorney rose. "Defendant is present and ready, Your Honor." "Very well. Opening statements." Barbara's opening statement was precise and devastating. She laid out 10 years of lies in chronological order, supported by documents she displayed on a screen for the judge to see. Bank records showing every transfer. The journal I'd kept with my handwritten notes. Text messages from Marcus thanking me for the money and promising he was staying strong. Screenshots of social media posts showing vacations and luxury purchases. A statement from Dr. Harrison at Memorial Cancer Center confirming Marcus had never been a patient. Employment records showing Marcus had worked full-time throughout the alleged illness. The evidence was overwhelming. "Your Honor," Barbara concluded, "the defendant systematically defrauded his 73-year-old mother for 10 years, using her love and trust as weapons against her. He stole $127,400, money she had saved for her retirement, money she needed for her own medical care, money she obtained by mortgaging the home she shared with her late husband. He did this while vacationing in Hawaii, driving a BMW and installing a pool in his backyard. We asked the court to hold him fully accountable." Marcus's attorney tried his best, but there wasn't much he could do. His opening statement suggested that family disputes were complicated, that there might have been misunderstandings, that Dorothy Patterson was a confused elderly woman who perhaps hadn't understood how her money was being used. I sat there and listened to a stranger call me confused and elderly, and I felt nothing but cold determination. The trial lasted 3 days. Barbara called witness after witness. Dr. Harrison testified via video link from Phoenix, confirming that Marcus had never been treated at his hospital. Detective Rodriguez testified about her investigation and the evidence she'd gathered. A forensic accountant named Walter Chen traced every dollar I'd sent and showed how it had been spent on vacations, luxury goods, and home improvements. My neighbor Patricia testified about my mental sharpness and the phone call she'd received from Marcus trying to discredit me. And then I testified. Barbara led me through my story slowly, methodically. She asked about my marriage to Harold, about raising my children, about the day Marcus called with his diagnosis. She asked about the sacrifices I'd made, the meals I'd skipped, the dental work I'd postponed, the mortgage I'd taken out. She asked me to read entries from my journal out loud. "August 2019, I read, my voice steady even as tears ran down my face. "Sent Marcus $1,500 for new medication insurance won't cover. Had to cancel my eye appointment again. Reading getting harder, but Marcus needs this more than I need glasses." When Barbara finished her direct examination, Marcus's attorney approached me for cross-examination. He was gentle at first, almost sympathetic, but I could see where he was heading. "Mrs. Patterson, you're 73 years old, is that correct?" "Yes." "And you've been living alone since your husband passed?" "Yes." 15 years now. That must be lonely. Difficult, I manage. Sometimes, when we're lonely, we might misremember things, get confused about details. I looked him straight in the eye. Young man, I worked in medical records for 32 years. My entire job was keeping track of details. I'm not confused. I'm not misremembering. I have documentation for everything I've told this court. Your client stole from me for 10 years, and if you have evidence that proves otherwise, I'd love to see it. He had no follow-up questions. Marcus took the stand in his own defense. It was a mistake. Under Barbara's cross-examination, his lies unraveled completely. He couldn't name the private clinic where he'd supposedly been treated. He couldn't explain why he'd blocked me on social media while claiming to be too sick to see happy posts. He couldn't account for how he'd afforded vacations and luxury purchases on his salary alone. Mr. Patterson, Barbara said, her voice like a scalpel, did you or did you not tell your mother on January 14th, 2014, that you had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma? There was a scare. I thought I was sick. A scare? For 10 years? You thought you had cancer for 10 years? It's complicated. It's not complicated at all, Mr. Patterson. You lied. You lied to your mother for 10 years and took $127,000 from her. That's not complicated. That's theft. Marcus had no answer. He sat there, exposed, unable to meet my eyes or the judge's. On June 19th, 2024, at 2:15 p.m., Judge Morrison delivered her verdict. The court finds for the plaintiff on all counts, she said, her voice ringing through the courtroom. The defendant, Marcus Patterson, is liable for fraud, theft by deception, elder financial abuse, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conversion of property. The evidence presented has been overwhelming and uncontroverted. The defendant created and maintained a fictitious illness for the sole purpose of extracting money from his elderly mother, a woman who loved him unconditionally and sacrificed her own well-being for his benefit. She paused, and I saw her jaw tighten with something that looked like personal disgust. In my 23 years on the bench, I have seen many cases of family betrayal, but I have rarely seen anything as calculated, as cruel, or as sustained as what this defendant did to his mother. He exploited the most fundamental bond in human society, the love between parent and child, and he did so for 10 years without apparent remorse. The judge ordered full restitution of $127,400, plus interest totaling $18,000, plus punitive damages of $100,000. Total judgment, $245,400. Additionally, Judge Morrison continued, the court is issuing a restraining order prohibiting the defendant from contacting the plaintiff by any means. Any violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and incarceration. Marcus sat motionless at the defendant's table. His attorney whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. He just stared at the table in front of him, his face blank, as if he couldn't quite process what had just happened. I felt Rebecca squeeze my hand. Patricia was crying in the gallery. Barbara nodded once, satisfied. And me? I felt like I could breathe again for the first time in months. The criminal case came to trial 3 months later, in September 2024. By then, Marcus was already feeling the civil judgment. He'd been forced to sell his house in Phoenix to pay part of the damages. The BMW was gone. Vanessa had filed for divorce and moved to Texas with their children, Tyler and Madison, who were now 18 and 16. Tyler, my grandson, had sent me a letter in August, apologizing for his father's actions and asking if he could visit me sometime. I wrote back immediately and told him he was always welcome in my home. The criminal trial was shorter than the civil case, but no less devastating for Marcus. The evidence was the same, and the prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, laid it out methodically for the jury. On September 27, 2024, Marcus was convicted of felony theft and elder abuse. He was sentenced to 4 years in state prison with the possibility of parole after 2 years. I did not attend the sentencing. I'd said everything I needed to say in the civil trial. But Barbara called me that evening to tell me the result. "It's done," she said. "He's going to prison." I thanked her and hung up the phone. Then I went outside and sat in my garden next to Harold's roses, and I cried, not for Marcus, for the son I thought I had, the son who never really existed. The consequences for Marcus continued to accumulate in the months that followed. The electronics company where he'd worked for 20 years fired him immediately after his arrest became public. His name appeared in news stories, local at first, then picked up by national outlets covering elder abuse cases. Former friends distanced themselves. Colleagues who had respected him wanted nothing to do with him. Vanessa's divorce was finalized in November 2024. She got full custody of Madison and most of their remaining assets. Tyler, who had turned 18 just before the divorce, chose not to live with either parent. He enrolled in community college in Spokane, near me, and rented a small apartment. We had dinner together every Sunday. "I don't understand how he could do it," Tyler said to me one evening, shaking his head. "How could he lie to you like that? For 10 years? You're his mother." "I don't know, sweetheart," I told him. "I've stopped trying to understand. What I know is that his choices don't define who you are. You get to make your own choices. And so far, you're making good ones." He hugged me then, and for a moment, I could almost forget the pain his father had caused. I saw Marcus one more time, about a year after his conviction. It was February 2025, and I was grocery shopping at the Safeway on Division Street. I had just turned into the produce section when I looked up and saw him standing by the apples. He looked terrible. Prison had aged him. His hair was grayer, his face more lined. He was wearing clothes that hung loose on a thinner frame. He must have been on parole, released early for good behavior. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. For a long second, we just stared at each other. Then he took a step toward me, opening his mouth as if to speak. I held up my hand. "No," he stopped. "You don't get to talk to me," I said, my voice calm and clear. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to apologize. There is nothing you can say that will undo what you did. So just walk away, and don't ever approach me again." He stood there for another moment, his mouth open, his eyes wet. Then he turned and walked out of the store, leaving his cart behind. I finished my shopping. I went home. I made myself a nice dinner, a steak and baked potato and a glass of good wine. And I felt nothing, not triumph, not pity, just quiet certainty that justice had been served. The judgment money came in slowly, through garnished wages and asset liquidations, but by the end of 2025, I had recovered most of what Marcus had stolen. The first thing I did was pay off the mortgage on my house. $25,000? Gone. My home was mine again, free and clear. And the next thing I did was take a trip. Harold and I had always dreamed of seeing the Grand Canyon together. We'd planned it for our 40th anniversary, but he died 2 years before we could go. In March 2025, I finally made that trip. Rebecca came with me. We stood at the rim together, looking out at that vast, impossible beauty, and I scattered a small portion of Harold's ashes into the wind. "We made it, honey," I whispered. "We finally made it." I used some of the money to help Tyler with his college expenses. He was studying business and doing well, determined to make something of himself despite his father's shadow. I set up a small trust fund for Madison, too, for when she turned 18. She was still in Texas with her mother, but we wrote letters, and I hoped she'd want a relationship with me someday. I donated $25,000 to the Spokane Senior Center's Elder Abuse Prevention Program. They used it to fund education workshops and a hotline for seniors who suspected they were being exploited. They named the program after me, the Dorothy Patterson Family Financial Safety Initiative. Every time I see that name on their literature, I feel a small glow of satisfaction. I renovated my kitchen with some of the punitive damages. New cabinets, new countertops, a new stove that doesn't threaten to burn my oatmeal every morning. I bought myself a comfortable new chair for the living room, though I kept Harold's old recliner too, and I finally got that dental work done, the work I'd postponed for years while sending money to Marcus. My dentist said she'd never seen a patient so happy to get a root canal. But the best change wasn't about money. It was about how I spent my time. I started volunteering with the Spokane Police Department's Elder Outreach Program, sharing my story with other seniors who might be vulnerable to financial exploitation. I spoke at community centers and churches and retirement homes. I told them about the red flags I'd missed, the questions I should have asked, the documentation that ultimately saved me. Trust but verify, I'd tell them. Love your children, but keep your records. And if something doesn't feel right, talk to someone outside the family. Get a second opinion. Don't let shame keep you silent. Those talks became the most rewarding part of my week. I met so many wonderful people, other survivors who shared their own stories, families who were learning to protect their vulnerable members, young social workers who were dedicated to preventing elder abuse. I made new friends. I found new purpose. My doctor, during my annual checkup in September 2025, looked at my charts and then looked at me with something like amazement. Dorothy, your blood pressure is down. Your stress markers have improved. You look 10 years younger than you did last year. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Or what I was doing was living, really living, for the first time since Harold died. I had my home. I had my garden. I had Rebecca and her family, who came to visit more often now. I had Tyler, my grandson, who had become a regular presence in my life. I had Patricia and my book club and my church friends and my volunteer work. I had purpose and peace and the knowledge that I had fought back and won. The story doesn't have a neat ending. Real life never does. Marcus is out of prison now, living somewhere in Arizona, working some kind of job. Tyler told me he doesn't speak to his father anymore. Madison is in college, studying psychology, and we video chat once a month. Vanessa remarried last year, and I hear she's happy. Life goes on. But some nights, when I'm sitting in my living room with a cup of tea, looking at the photograph of Harold and Marcus from that long-ago 4th of July, I still wonder, how did the boy in that picture, the one with his father's smile and my stubborn streak, become the man who stole from me for 10 years? Was there a moment when he chose this path, or did he slide into it gradually, one small lie leading to another, until the lies became too big to stop? I'll never know, and I've made peace with that. What I know is this: I loved my son. I gave him everything a mother could give. And when he betrayed that love in the cruelest possible way, I didn't crumble. I didn't surrender. I fought back. I documented everything. I found good people to help me. I stood in a courtroom and told the truth. And I won. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I wanted to see my son in prison, but because some things are worth fighting for. Truth is worth fighting for. Justice is worth fighting for. And sometimes, the only way to truly love yourself is to stop allowing the people you love to hurt you. I learned 3 things from this experience that I carry with me every day. First, keep records. Write things down. Save receipts and messages and documents. You never know when you'll need them. Second, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let love blind you to manipulation. And third, you are never too old to fight back. 73 years old, and I took on my own son in court and won. Age is not weakness. Age is wisdom. And sometimes wisdom knows when it's time to stop being a victim and start being a survivor. So I ask you, my listeners, if family betrayed you, would you fight back? What would you do? Would you let shame keep you silent? Or would you find the courage to speak the truth no matter how painful? I hope you never have to answer those questions. But if you do, I hope my story gives you some small measure of strength. I hope you know that you're not alone, And I hope you remember that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories. Tell me what you would do in my situation. Tell me about your own experiences if you're comfortable sharing. And most of all, tell me where you're listening from so I can know how far this story has traveled. My name is Dorothy Patterson. I'm 74 years old now. I live in Spokane, Washington, in the house where I raise my children, next to the garden where my husband's roses still bloom every summer. And I am at peace. Thank you for listening.